You ever notice how the highway feels different at night? During the day, it's all motion and noise, sunlight bouncing off windshields, radio chatter, the rhythmic hum of tires against asphalt. But once the sun dips behind the horizon, the same road changes. The sound feels hollow. The light from your headlight stretches too far, and yet not far enough. Every shape on the shoulder becomes something else in your mind. A signpost turns into a figure. A rusted car looks like it's waiting for you. This story starts on one of those nights, long, empty, and a little too quiet. It was early October, 2017. The kind of cool autumn night where the air smells like dry leaves and diesel fumes. A man named Daniel Reed, 33 years old, was driving west across Highway 93, a stretch of road that runs through Nevada, cutting across miles of desert nothingness. Daniel wasn't a trucker or a drifter. He was just an ordinary guy, a mechanical engineer from Colorado, heading to visit his sister in California. He had taken this route once before years ago, but this time it felt different. Maybe because he left later than he meant to. Maybe because his GPS kept losing signal. Maybe because sometimes, when you're driving alone for too long, the silence starts talking back. He wasn't afraid, not yet. But as the miles ticked by, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't as alone as he should have been. Highway 93 is one of those long, open roads with stretches so empty that your own headlights are the only thing reminding you the world still exists. No towns, no gas stations for hours, just the wind pushing dust across the road. Around 10:30 p.m., Daniel's fuel gauge dipped below a quarter tank. He told himself he'd stop at the next station he found, though he couldn't remember seeing one for at least 40 miles. That's when he saw the first sign. A flickering neon glow in the distance, red, then white, then gone again. He leaned forward, squinting through the windshield. It looked like a gas station. Relief washed over him. But as he got closer, he noticed something off. The lights weren't steady. They blinked in an irregular rhythm, like someone was flicking a switch on and off at random. And the place seemed small. Too small for a proper service stop. He pulled in anyway. The station looked like it had been built in the 1970s and never touched since. The paint was peeling. The sign above the pumps just said gas in block letters. No brand, no logo. There was a single car parked near the building, an old silver sedan with dust coating its windows. Daniel parked near pump 2. When he stepped out, the first thing he noticed was the silence. No wind, no insects, no hum of fluorescent lights. Just that deep desert stillness that makes your ears ring. He walked toward the door. Inside, a single light bulb flickered above the counter. The clerk, an older man, maybe late 60s, looked up from behind a small radio. His expression didn't change when Daniel came in. "Pumps work?" Daniel asked, pulling his wallet out. The man nodded slowly, eyes never leaving him. "Cash only," he said. His voice was low and raspy, like he hadn't used it in hours. Daniel handed him a 20. The man slid it into the register, then said, "You're out late." Daniel gave a small laugh. "Yeah, long drive. Trying to make it to Barstow by morning." The clerk paused, almost like he was listening for something. Then he said quietly, "You shouldn't be on this road after midnight." Daniel frowned. "Why is that?" The old man looked up, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw genuine worry in his eyes. "Things change out here when it gets late," he said. "Road don't stay the same. You'll see lights that aren't real. Hear cars that ain't there. Best to stop somewhere safe for the hour turns." Daniel smiled politely, unsure if it was a warning or just desert superstition. "I'll keep that in mind," he said, heading back to fill his tank. When he turned, the clerk was still watching him, not blinking, not moving. He tried to shake off the unease. Just an old man telling ghost stories, he thought. But as he pumped gas, he noticed the silver sedan parked nearby. It looked abandoned, one of its doors slightly open, the front seat covered in a layer of dust. The air smelled faintly of metal, sharp and cold. He finished filling up, climbed back into his car, and checked the clock. 11:47 p.m. He'd make good time if he kept going. As he pulled back onto the highway, his headlights swept across the empty lot. The clerk was still standing inside the station window, watching him go. The first 20 minutes were fine, just endless black road and the hum of the engine. But then, Daniel noticed something strange. His fuel gauge, the one he had just filled, was dropping. Fast. He frowned. Maybe the sensor was broken. But then the car began to jerk, like it was losing power. He glanced at the GPS, no signal. He tried calling his sister, no bars. The world outside seemed to stretch wider and darker. Up ahead, through the windshield, he saw headlights, a pair of them, small and distant, swaying slightly side to side like the other car was struggling to stay on the road. Relief flickered in his chest. Maybe he wasn't alone after all. He flashed his high beams once to signal. The other car didn't respond. As they drew closer, Daniel noticed something that made his stomach turn. The headlights weren't moving forward. They were staying the same distance away, as if matching his speed perfectly. He slowed down. The lights slowed too. He accelerated. They did the same. Then, for just a moment, the road curved slightly to the left, and the beams cut across the desert. That's when he realized there was no car. No outline, no shadow. Just 2 points of light suspended in the dark, moving with him like a reflection that shouldn't exist. Daniel gripped the wheel tighter. Okay, he muttered to himself. It's just exhaustion. Long drive. Headlights from a distant hill. But deep down, he knew there weren't any hills out there. At exactly midnight, his dashboard clock blinked 12 a.m. and froze. The radio crackled. Static hissed through the speakers, rising and falling like breathing. Then a faint voice broke through. A whisper, so quiet he couldn't tell if it came from the radio or somewhere inside the car. Turn around. Daniel's hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. The whisper had been so faint that for a moment he thought it was just the static morphing into words, the way white noise sometimes plays tricks on tired minds. But the sound lingered, repeating once, softer this time. Turn around. He swallowed hard, forcing a nervous laugh. Nope, he said to the empty car. Not listening to that. He flicked off the radio, and the voice vanished with the static. But now the silence was worse. He could hear the faint creak of the steering column, the hum of the tires, even his own pulse drumming behind his ears. The 2 distant lights were still there in his rear-view mirror, steady, patient, keeping pace. Probably a reflection, he told himself again, though his voice lacked conviction. He leaned forward, trying to see beyond the cone of his headlights. The desert stretched endlessly, the black ribbon of asphalt fading into nothing. He drove another few miles before realizing something else was wrong. The mile markers were repeating. He was sure he'd passed marker 172 15 minutes ago, yet there it was again, glinting faintly in the headlights. He slowed down and checked the odometer. He had traveled almost 20 miles since the gas station, but the scenery hadn't changed. The same broken guardrail, the same clump of dry bushes, even the same faint ridge of mountains silhouetted against the star-choked sky. A knot formed in his chest. GPS, come on, he muttered, tapping his phone. Still no signal. He debated turning around, but something about that idea felt wrong, like whatever was behind him was waiting for exactly that. So he kept going. Minutes stretched into an hour. His dashboard clock still read 12 a.m. When he finally saw a building ahead, he almost didn't believe it. A motel sign flickered weakly, Rest Easy Inn. The place looked abandoned, its neon letters half burned out. But there were lights on in a few windows, and one door stood slightly open. Relief surged through him. Maybe he could rest for a bit, figure out where he was. He pulled into the cracked parking lot, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The building was a single-story strip of 10 rooms. The kind of roadside motel built for travelers who never planned to stay more than a night. The office window glowed faintly amber. Daniel stepped out, stretching his stiff legs. The air was colder now. He noticed, with a small chill, that the 2 distant lights that had followed him were gone. Inside, the office smelled faintly of dust and old coffee. A bell sat on the counter. He rang it once. A woman appeared from a back room, mid-50s, thin, with tired eyes that seemed to hold too many sleepless nights. Late drive, she asked politely. Yeah, Daniel said. Car trouble maybe. Mind if I grab a room for a few hours? She hesitated, glancing toward the dark window. "We don't get many folks after midnight," she said. Daniel gave a tired smile. "Guess I'm lucky then." She handed him a key attached to a faded plastic tag. Room 7. "If you hear anything strange," she added, voice dropping, "don't open the door." Daniel blinked. "Excuse me." But she had already turned back toward the office. Room 7 smelled of dust and stale fabric softener. He tossed his bag on the bed and sat down, rubbing his temples. The silence in the room was heavy, like the walls were listening. He turned on the TV, only static. The clock on the nightstand blinked the same frozen time, 12 a.m. He tried to call his sister again. Still no signal. He sighed, lying back on the bed. "Just a weird night," he whispered. "Sleep it off." But sleep didn't come easy. At some point, maybe half an hour later, he heard it, footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, crunching on the gravel. He froze, holding his breath. Someone stopped right outside his door. A soft knock followed. "Daniel." The voice was a woman's, calm, familiar somehow. He sat up, heart hammering. No one knew he was here. "Who's there?" he called. Silence. Then the voice again. "Please, open the door." He crept closer, peering through the peephole. The hallway outside was empty. He backed away. The knocking returned, louder this time. "Daniel," the voice pleaded. "You need to come with me. It's not safe here." Every instinct screamed not to open the door, but curiosity pulled at him. "Who are you?" No answer, only the sound of the wind rising outside, rattling the thin motel walls. Then the lights flickered, and in that split second before darkness, he saw a shadow slide under the door, a human-shaped outline that wasn't attached to any body. The bulb steadied again, and the floor was empty. Daniel stumbled back, breath quick and shallow. "Nope. No. He grabbed his keys and opened the door a crack. The walkway outside was deserted. The desert air bit cold against his skin. Across the parking lot, the office window was dark. The neon "Rest Easy" in sign had gone out completely. He shut the door, locked it, and leaned against it. "This isn't happening," he whispered. The TV flickered to life on its own. Static again. Then, for half a second, the screen showed the gas station clerk's face, eyes wide and unblinking. "Turn around," the man's voice echoed faintly through the speakers. The screen went black. Daniel grabbed his bag and bolted. Outside, the wind had picked up, carrying sand across the asphalt like ghostly mist. His car sat alone at the edge of the lot, headlights reflecting faintly off the motel windows. He jumped in, turned the key. The engine started on the first try. He didn't look back as he sped out of the lot. The highway stretched ahead, endless and dark. He tried to steady his breathing, telling himself he'd drive until sunrise, find a real town, and laugh about all this later. But a few miles down the road, he saw it again, the same gas station. Same flickering sign. Same silver sedan by the door. His stomach dropped. He checked the rearview mirror. The motel was gone. The road behind him was pitch-black emptiness. He slowed to a stop, staring at the station. It looked identical in every detail, except for one thing. The clerk was standing outside this time, waving. Daniel's pulse hammered in his ears. The old man stood under the flickering sign, the same stiff posture, the same expression that wasn't quite a smile. His hand rose slowly in that strange, deliberate wave, as though he'd been expecting Daniel to come back. For a long moment, Daniel just sat there with the engine idling, headlights cutting a pale cone through the dust. He felt a pull to roll down the window, to ask what was going on, to demand an explanation that made sense. But something in the clerk's stillness froze him in place. He glanced down at the dashboard. The clock still read 12 a.m. It hadn't moved a single minute since he'd left the gas station the first time. The fuel gauge, too, was dipping again, slowly but steadily sliding toward empty, even though he'd barely driven a few miles. Daniel put the car in reverse. "Nope," he muttered, "I'm not doing this again." But as he backed up, his headlights swept across the road, and for a split second, he saw another car parked behind the station, an old silver sedan with its driver's side door open. Someone was sitting in the front seat, head turned toward him. When he blinked, the figure was gone. He jammed the car into drive and pressed the accelerator. The tires squealed against the cracked pavement, kicking up a swirl of dust. He didn't look back this time, he just drove. The highway bent slightly north, then west again, but every bend felt the same. He tried to find a landmark, a sign, anything that proved he was actually moving forward. Nothing changed. The same flat horizon, the same empty sky, the same faint glimmer of red taillights that appeared and disappeared in the distance. At some point, exhaustion began to blur everything together. He caught himself talking out loud just to fill the silence. "Okay, Daniel," he said. "You're hallucinating. Lack of sleep. You've been driving too long." He turned the radio back on, hoping for music or a weather report, something to anchor him. The speakers crackled with static again, but buried deep in the noise was a rhythm, a soft, repeating thump like a heartbeat. Then, faintly, a whisper. "Wrong way." Daniel twisted the dial, but the sound only grew clearer. "Wrong way, wrong way." He hit the power button and drove faster. Then he laughed, the dry, nervous kind of laugh that comes right before panic. Maybe the old guy was right. Things change after midnight. He turned the radio back on, hoping for music or a weather report, something to anchor him. The speakers crackled with static again, but buried deep in the noise was a rhythm, a soft, repeating thump like a heartbeat. Then, faintly, a whisper. "Wrong way." Daniel twisted the dial, but the sound only grew clearer. "Wrong way, wrong way." He hit the power button and drove faster. "Morning," Daniel said weakly. The old man didn't answer. He just looked at the coffee cup in front of Daniel, then back up at him. Finally, he said quietly, "You made it through the night." Daniel frowned. "Yeah, somehow." He glanced around, half expecting someone else to react, but the waitress had gone still, her eyes focused on the far wall. "I told you," the clerk continued. "Should have turned back." "I tried," Daniel said. "The road didn't make sense. Every time I thought I was leaving, I ended up back where I started." The man nodded slowly, like that explained everything. "That's how it gets you," he said. "It keeps you driving till the night decides you belong to it." Daniel forced a shaky laugh. "You make it sound like the highway's alive." The old man's gaze stayed steady. "Ain't alive. Just hungry." A chill ran through Daniel's chest. "Look," he said, "I don't know what's going on, but He stopped. The clerk was gone. Just gone, no door creak, no footsteps. 1 second he was standing there, the next he wasn't. Daniel looked around wildly, but no one else seemed to have noticed. The waitress finally moved again, smiling like nothing had happened. "Need a refill, hon?" He pushed his cup away. "No thanks." He paid his tab, left cash on the counter, and stepped outside into the bright morning light. The sun felt real, grounding, but something about the air still felt off, too still for morning. The streets were almost empty. Across the road stood a small convenience store with an old bulletin board by the door. As Daniel passed, a faded newspaper clipping caught his eye. The headline read, "3 travelers missing on Highway 93. Vehicles found abandoned near collapsed bridge." The article was dated October 12, 2004. He scanned it quickly. The details hit too close. One was a college student from Denver, another a long-haul driver, the third a man named Daniel Reed. His breath caught. The picture was black and white, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Same jawline, same eyes. The caption beneath read, "Last seen leaving a gas station outside Ely, Nevada." His hands shook as he stepped back. The wind caught the edge of the paper, fluttering it gently like a heartbeat. "No," he whispered. "That can't be real." He turned around and froze. His car, parked by the diner, looked different. Older. Dust covered the windows, and the license plate was rusted and bent. He stumbled closer, touched the hood, cold. Like it hadn't been driven in years. The street around him seemed to blur at the edges. The sunlight dimmed, washing to a pale gray. He looked back at the diner, but the building was gone. Only the faint outline of its sign remained, flickering against the hazy sky. Then he heard the voice again, close to his ear this time. "Turn around." Daniel spun. The old clerk stood inches away. This time his expression was different, tired, almost sad. "You stayed too long," he said softly. "The road don't let go easy." "I'm not dead," Daniel said, more plea than argument. "I'm right here." The man sighed, shaking his head. "You think that's what the others said?" Daniel looked past him, and his stomach twisted. Behind the clerk, faint outlines shimmered in the heat. Shapes of cars, dozens of them, all parked at odd angles along the shoulder of the road. Some new, some decades old. Inside each one, a shadow sat motionless in the driver's seat. The wind carried faint whispers, fragments of voices echoing each other. "Wrong way. Turn back. Keep driving." He stepped backward, shaking his head. "No. I made it out. I saw daylight." The clerk's gaze softened. "You saw what it wanted you to see." The ground beneath Daniel's feet rippled like heat on asphalt. The desert horizon folded inward, and suddenly he was standing once again at the gas station. The same flickering neon, the same silver sedan, the same frozen moment. Only this time, the sedan's door creaked open. Inside sat the woman he'd seen on the bridge, same pale dress, same hollow eyes. She turned her head slowly toward him and smiled. "Ready to drive?" she asked. Daniel stumbled backward toward his car, fumbling for the keys. No, I'm done. I'm done with this road." The woman stepped out of the sedan. Her shadow stretched unnaturally long across the pavement, reaching toward him like smoke. "You can't leave," she whispered. "You're part of the story now." He jumped into his car and slammed the door. The engine roared to life, louder than before, desperate. He floored the accelerator, tires squealing as he tore away from the station. The desert blurred around him. Wind howled through the cracks in the window. His chest felt tight, every breath shallow. But in the rearview mirror, the station didn't shrink. It stayed right there, the same distance away, no matter how fast he drove. He screamed, pounding the steering wheel. "Let me out." The radio came alive again, static first, then a voice, calm and steady. "Story of Daniel Reed," it said. "Highway 93. Another traveler lost." The voice faded into static, then into silence. Daniel looked ahead. The road finally ended, this time not with a bridge or a turn, but with nothing at all. Just a blank horizon swallowing him whole. He woke to the sound of rain. The dashboard clock read 7:42 a.m. The car was parked on the shoulder of a perfectly normal stretch of highway. The fuel tank was half full. The GPS showed his location 20 miles east of Barstow. For a long moment, he sat there, not moving. Everything looked ordinary. The sky, the road, the faint smell of coffee from the travel mug beside him. He let out a shaky laugh. Maybe it had all been a dream. Maybe he dozed off at the wheel and imagined the whole night. But then he noticed the glove compartment was open. Inside lay a small, faded key tag. Room 7, rest easy in. Daniel turned the little plastic tag over in his hand. The number 7 was faded almost white, the letters underneath barely legible. He stared at it for a long time, half expecting it to vanish the way everything else had. It didn't. It felt solid, rough-edged, real. He looked out at the highway again. The rain had stopped, leaving thin streams of water snaking along the asphalt. Morning light spilled over the desert, warming the horizon in dull gold. Cars passed occasionally, now real cars with license plates and radio antennas, and drivers who looked alive. He exhaled a long, uneven breath. "Okay," he whispered. "It's over." He rolled back onto the highway and drove slowly toward Barstow. Traffic thickened. The familiar signs of life returning bit by bit. Billboards, gas prices, distant trucks. The whole world felt noisy again, comforting in its clutter. Yet behind the hum of the tires, there was still a tiny sound he couldn't place, a low, rhythmic pulse in the static of his radio. He turned the knob, scanning stations. Each one bled with faint distortion. Then, for a second, a voice cut through. "Another report this morning. Vehicle found abandoned off Highway 93. Authorities say the driver has not been located." He twisted the dial, heart pounding. The voice vanished into white noise. "Coincidence," he muttered, though he didn't believe it. By afternoon, he reached his sister's house on the edge of town. She came out onto the porch, relief flooding her face when she saw him. Daniel, you said you'd be here last night. I was worried. Yeah, he said, forcing a smile. Got a little turned around. Long story. She hugged him tight, then pulled back to look him over. You look like you haven't slept in days. Feels like it. Inside, her home smelled of coffee and fresh paint, normal, grounding smells. He sat at the kitchen table while she poured him a cup. You know that stretch of Highway 93? He asked casually. She nodded. Sure. It's been closed for years after that bridge collapse. Daniel froze mid-sip. Closed? It looked open last night. She frowned. Last night? That can't be right. They tore the whole section down. He set the cup down carefully. Steam drifted between them. Maybe I took a different route, he said softly. But in the back of his mind, something whispered. Wrong way. That night, after his sister went to bed, Daniel sat alone in the living room scrolling through news stories on his phone. He typed Highway 93 Nevada missing persons. Hundreds of hits came up, old articles, photographs of travelers who never made it across the state line. He clicked one at random. A man stared back from a screen. Mid-30s, tired eyes, same slight scar near the jawline. The caption read, Daniel Reed, missing since 2004. The phone slipped from his hand and hit the carpet. Outside, a car horn sounded once, sharp and lonely. He walked to the window. Parked across the street was a silver sedan. Its driver's door hung open, interior dark. He blinked. The street light flickered, and the car was gone. 2 days later, Daniel packed a bag. He told his sister he needed to clear his head, maybe drive up north for a few days. She worried, of course, but he promised to call. He never said where he was going. Somewhere beyond the city limits. He turned the radio back on. The static returned instantly, that same faint heartbeat hiding inside it. He could almost make out words now, familiar ones spoken in the old man's rough voice. You stayed too long. The highway stretched ahead, endless, inviting, indifferent. He pressed the accelerator. Weeks later, a highway patrol officer found an abandoned car on a side road near the Nevada-California border. The tank was half full, the keys still in the ignition. On the passenger seat lay a motel key tag. Room 7. Rest Easy Inn. No motel by that name existed anywhere within 3 states. People still talk about Highway 93. Truckers say they see headlights that never belong to any car, or hear voices whispering through dead radio channels. A few travelers claim they've stopped for gas at a lonely desert station with a single gray-haired clerk who warns them to turn back before midnight. Most laugh it off. But every year or two, another driver disappears somewhere between Ely and the California line. The locals say the highway keeps its own stories, and it isn't done collecting them. And if you ever find yourself driving that same road, with your clock frozen at 12 a.m. and a faint voice on the radio telling you to turn around, maybe listen. Because some roads don't lead anywhere. They just circle until you belong to them. The sound of tires fades, the screen darkens, and a soft whisper echoes. That was just one story. 2 more roads are waiting. The wind carried a dry hum across the desert, the kind that made everything feel still even when it wasn't. Somewhere in that silence, a truck engine rumbled faintly, and then faded into the distance. The stretch of highway that had swallowed Daniel Reed was quiet again, as though nothing had ever happened there. For most people, Highway 93 was just another long, empty road cutting through the western United States. A shortcut, maybe. A way to save time between small towns. But for the few who lived along its edges, the gas station attendants, the motel owners, the truck drivers who passed it every night, it had another reputation. People said the road was cursed. Others said it wasn't the road at all, but something that moved along it. No one could quite agree. A week after Daniel's car was found, a local journalist named Mara Jennings pulled her old Subaru onto the same desolate stretch of asphalt. The air shimmered in the heat, and her phone's GPS had already stopped working miles back. She'd come to write a story about the strange disappearances along the highway, thinking it would make a good feature for the small Nevada paper she worked for. Her editor told her it was nothing. Urban legends, tired truckers, maybe a few lost tourists. But when she found out about the car registered to Daniel Reed, The one left untouched with the motel key still inside. Something about it stayed with her. Mara had always been drawn to places like this, forgotten corners of the country where stories hung heavier than the air itself. She parked by the shoulder and stepped out, feeling the wind tug at her hair. The smell of dust, rubber, and sun-baked metal filled the air. The silence was unnerving. She set her camera on the hood and began snapping photos. The cracked pavement, the endless desert horizon, the faded green highway sign that leaned just slightly to the left. Then she noticed something. Across the road, half buried in sand, was a piece of wood. She brushed the dirt away with her boot and saw faint letters carved into it. Rest easy in. Her chest tightened. She crouched closer, tracing the carved letters with her fingertips. The wood was old, weathered smooth by years of sun, but the words were still readable. She stood up slowly, scanning the horizon. No buildings, no structures. Nothing but sand and sky. Still, she could have sworn she heard something. Music, faint and warped, like it was coming from a jukebox in another room. A few muffled piano notes, and then silence again. She shook her head. Desert acoustics, she muttered, trying to sound casual, though her voice came out thin. She got back into her car and started the engine, but the radio flickered to life on its own. Static filled the speakers for a moment, then a voice crackled through, a man's voice, deep and worn, like an old recording. Turn back before dark. Mara froze. The voice disappeared as suddenly as it had come. She checked her phone. No signal, no open apps. She let out a slow breath. Okay, she said to herself. That's new. She reached for her recorder and clicked it on. Highway 93, mile marker 217, she said into it. Heard what sounded like a voice on my car, radio warning to turn back. Could be interference from local stations. We'll confirm later. She set the recorder on the seat, hands shaking slightly. Her plan had been to drive to the next town and find locals who remembered the old motel. But now, curiosity tugged harder. What if she could find where the Rest Easy Inn once stood? She pulled back onto the highway, scanning both sides for tire tracks or a side road. About 5 miles ahead, she spotted a break in the guardrail and a dirt path cutting off into the desert. It wasn't on any map. She hesitated for a moment, then turned the wheel and followed it. The path twisted through low hills, the ground shifting from gravel to packed sand. The further she drove, the quieter everything became. Even the sound of the engine felt muted. And then, as she rounded a bend, she saw it. A crumbling sign leaned against a fence post, half covered in weeds. The words were barely visible, but she could still make them out. Rest Easy Inn. Behind it stood the remains of a small building, collapsed roof, broken windows, and what looked like an old neon sign lying on the ground. Its red letters faded to ghostly white. Mara parked and got out, heart pounding. She clicked on her flashlight, even though there was still daylight left. The inside smelled of dust and damp wood. The wallpaper had peeled away in long strips, revealing dark stains underneath. There were still doors here, numbered in black paint. 3, 4, 5, 6. And there, at the end of the hallway, room 7. Her stomach twisted. She tried the handle. It stuck at first, then creaked open. The air inside was heavier, colder. Sunlight filtered through a hole in the roof, cutting a pale line across the room. On the nightstand lay a single object, a key, attached to a faded plastic tag. She picked it up and saw the number carved into it, 7. But this one wasn't covered in dust. It looked new. Mara's pulse thudded in her ears. She looked around the room again. The bed frame was broken, the curtains shredded, but the nightstand looked untouched. Then she noticed a dark mark on the wall near the window. Letters, written faintly in what looked like charcoal or ash. He didn't leave. Her throat went dry. She backed toward the door, keeping her flashlight aimed at the writing. The beam flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The room dimmed around her. Mara, a voice whispered behind her. She spun around, flashlight trembling in her hand. Who's there? Nothing. Just the slow creak of the building settling. She stepped outside, gasping for air. The desert light burned her eyes, and she blinked hard until her vision cleared. Her car sat where she left it, but now the passenger door was open. She rushed forward and stopped short. On the seat, her recorder was still on, its red light blinking. When she picked it up, she realized it had been recording the whole time she was inside. She rewound a few seconds and pressed play. At first, only static. Then her own voice describing the hallway. Then, faintly, another voice overlapping hers, deep and steady. Turn back before dark.